Alright, we'll see. I'm not sure how this is gonna go because I have a migraine. But we'll give it a go. I do have some coffee, and I got some pills. We'll see. We shall see how this goes. We have a button. It does nothing. Now the question is, what should we do today? This is like an event thing, right? Let's try to set up this window a little bit, and then we'll see what happens. All right. So I'm also thinking how the event system should work. Because I want it to be modular. But I'm not sure modular how. Or how to connect it together in a way that makes sense. So I'm just thinking what this button should do. Finalize equals true. Here, we should have something in main controller that's just gonna be like... I execute event option. Index. And that's what it's gonna do. We should also have a public void close event window. I think. And then where were we? Here. Well, that didn't do anything. So, let's see. Dot draw in an entity should say if is enabled is false, and we return. The same thing should happen in update. Same thing should happen in mouse input. Bam! It's gone. Okay. I almost clicked stop streaming to turn off the game. Alright. Now the thing with that, let's make a new window. What should this be called? This should be called something like that. Oh, that doesn't do anything. Oh, I see, I see, I see, I see. What's this? There. But it shouldn't use that anyway. It needs another And this should be renamed to event option button behavior. Just, I wanted to say behavior so I can remember that it is a behavior. Now this should be more how a base button works. But so this is code that cannot be duplicated in case something goes wrong. Or just cannot happen. Let's actually call this window, and then we'll pass in a window. It doesn't matter. We don't need a check like that. I'm just being stupid. Can we now open it? No. But no. Hmm. I don't know. Why does it only work once? It's. I think that the button should be fine. So. Does this not work? I think this works, doesn't it? Wait, hold on. I know why. This is still the wrong button type. There. There we go. Now we can open and close it. It's not meant to, really, but it's meant to just open on its own, I think. Right, so... Okay. Uh, Very good suggestion there, IntelliSense, you fucking idiot. Alright, so we need to create some buttons here. And the event option button behavior. I think should take an index. And yeah, and then here, this will take an I. And then we need to say button set position. And the position should be I do need a set local position, I think, but it's kind of weird because the set local position would actually be the like how it works, and the set position would need to be converted to local position. But let's see, set position. How big is the window? It's 600. So maybe this should be at like 100. And then it's 800. This is 50 high, so it's 6, that's 300. So let's say let's say 50 here. And then let's say 50 plus 50 times I. All right. This won't be possible without setting up text alignment. It doesn't matter right now. Let's focus on doing some stuff that matter, because my headache is terrible. This is actually not this simple. This should be based on like the text body and everything. And it shouldn't look like this. I think I want it to just be text that you hover over, and then it adds a little arrow next to it and like bolds it when you have the mouse over it. But this is just to make it work. So, now that we have that, what should an event look like? How should it work? That's going to be the tricky part. That's the core of the game, and it's also the hardest part. By far. More so than combat or anything, it doesn't compare. Just wonder what kind of structure it should have. Is I wanted to create some kind of system where it starts out in a way, and then that has branching paths that are not randomized, but randomized within allowed parameters based on the scenario. Like, just as an example of something that like I wouldn't do for this setting, because I don't want to have like fantasy stuff like goblins and shit. But let's say it was just a fantasy game with just traditional Tolkien stuff. You could have like a dungeon, and then when you generate the start of the dungeon as like an event, let's say that the dungeon is actually just like an event chain, and you just go through it like a choose your own adventure game, and not like an actual dungeon that you walk around in. Then when you generate it, you generate that it's like it's goblins or it's kobolds or it's orcs or whatever, you know, and then that determines the possible paths on the upcoming ones. But you should also generate something earlier that's like, what kind of thing is this? And, you know. Is it like a large orc army, or is it like just a couple of whatevers? And then you should generate the rest based on those parameters. Just so it makes sense. But it's gonna be difficult. Really, 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 really difficult. And I also want like characters involved as well in the RNG. I want to have some kind of system where you have like propensity, you know, like anger or honor, whatever, you know, read those kind of parameters. But, and that's really easy to do, really. But I don't want it to be fully RNG like that, because it needs to be like soft RNG. Kinda. Because it's easy to do it where it's just like, okay, he has 75 in greed, that means he has a 75% chance to do the greedy thing, or 25% chance to not do that. But that makes the character, it turns the characters into like bipolar people, where it's like a guy who's just nice normally is just like an asshole just randomly. So that doesn't really work. That's why I think it needs to have some level of softening to it, to the RNG. And it needs some kind of system where it's kind of like he has like a level of greed, for example, and whenever he rolls for something, it's never gonna fall within like not greedy. It's gonna be like, let's say he has like 7 greed by default. Then you roll between like -3 or -4 to +4 in behavior scores or something like that. +-2, then that's a range of 5. From if that's from like 0 to 10, then that's a lot, right? And then that could be further modified by other circumstances, like relationships or whatnot, you know? So like if you're the son of someone who's like super greedy, he might not, like he might get like a big penalty towards his greed roll in a greed scenario, so to speak. Like giving you money or something. Or he might hate you, even if you are his son, because you're a shitty son. And then he won't give you anything. Something like that. But I'm not sure what to do with that right now. My brain is only capable of doing something right now. And that something is, I don't know. Let's see, system. Let's put together a new script called... Should it be a character? What should it be? Yeah, I think character is the right term. So then we have a character. And characters should always have these stats. But I don't know what the stats should be. Exactly. I don't think greed and generosity are entirely mutually exclusive concepts. So I'm keeping those. But loyalty is like... Yeah, I think it should have a base loyalty. Because loyalty is also subjective, or... Well, yes, it is subjective, right? So... He might have higher loyalty towards one character than another character, but I think characters should also have base loyalty. And then their relationship with other characters should be a penalty. These are stats that we'll probably just come up with when we need them. But they also need other, like these are like behavior traits. But they also need other traits. Like intelligence. Now, I don't know, should they have... I think they should probably have like strength and stuff. I'm not sure. I think so. But I don't know what stats I would want. I think I'm gonna have extensive amounts of stats. I don't really like D&D stats, but they don't need to do the same thing. I don't like wisdom. I think wisdom is kind of a stupid name, but wisdom. Let's call that willpower. And then we'll also have education. Public int aggression. This is called I'm gonna call it lust. Faith. And one final. Now, charisma and appearance are kind of similar, but I don't like them being together, really. Because I think they're two different things. And perception, sight, and hearing is usually kind of the same, but I don't think that they're the same. And I don't need to really care about that. How do I put it? I can have more stats because it's a video game, right? And this is how it's not supposed to work, by the way. This is gonna... We have to do this. This is a little annoying, but it is what it is. Here we need a user stat, stat value, and then we just have to set that here, and then we roll. But I'll be right back. Maybe it shouldn't work like that. Let's... How should it work? I think it should work like... This shouldn't be called challenge value. This should be called modifier value. And what we then should do is we should roll... This should return an integer. And here we'll say rand equals new random. Actually, no. This should exist here. Right? Think. Where did I put it? Oh. Yeah, put it in main controller. Think. Unless it can be static. Can it be static? Then we just use it like that. Does that make sense? That is less than the specified maximum. Okay. From 0 to 100. That's actually 101 values, but that's fine. What if we do something like, let's see, if RNG is equals 0, then here we'll say int response value equals, or let's see, RNG modifier equals 0. If RNG equals 0, then RNG modifier equals -3. If RNG modifier is greater than 0 and less than or equal to, well, let's say greater than or equal to 1, and then less than 25, Then RNG modifier equals -2. If this should all be else ifs. Else if RNG modifier is greater than or equal to 25 and less than... No, it needs to be 20. And RNG modifier is less than 40. Then RNG modifier equals -1. Else if RNG modifier is greater than or equal to 60 and RNG modifier less than 80. And that's RNG modifier is +1. Else if RNG modifier equals to or greater than 80 and or less than 100. Else if RNG modifier is greater than or equals 100, then RNG modifier equals 3. That gives you like a crit or a critical failure, but it's not that big of a deal. It's just another step. Right? And then this is the RNG. They can be more or less of what they are. And we're gonna get a stat value here. It's just gonna be like this. Actually useful autocompletes. Keep it up. There. And then we're gonna return that value plus RNG value modifier plus modifier value. It returns here. Right? That way, they can only have responses that fall within +3 to -3 of their stat. But he's also gonna need tons of other things. And the question is, how many of these things should be... I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, how much of this should be like a data fed in from a data block? I think there should really be two creation methods. There should be one that's just RNG, kind of, and one that's loading in. There are going to be pre-made characters. They have a middle name, first name, surname. This might need to be different. It might need to be like an array or a list of strings. They might have multiple first names or surnames or middle names or multiple titles or whatever. But it doesn't really matter right now. That's something we can add at some other point if I decide to do that. Because they could just not have that, but they could have that. Then the character will have to be assigned a nation and stuff like that. Oh, come on. Hello, Dragon. How's it going? Let's do this. Stats. I guess. Why don't we do this? Yeah, I'm alright. We're just putting together some character functions here. Should the constructor just take everything? I don't know. I'm gonna have to randomize names too. That's gonna be ass. That means I have to come up with like 100 names for each different faction as well. I'm not really sure what to do. But that means that if it's like that, then what are we gonna do here? It needs to have like a couple of variables to steer it for the randomizing. But obviously we don't have that right now, so maybe we don't do anything. But let's just write a function to just debug initialize it. And we'll input a name, first name, surname, and we'll just leave it at that. And then basically all of these things need to be set. So we'll say equals globals dot random dot next $11. Is there anything else you can do with this? You can have a min and a max. But I guess 0 to 10 is okay. As for a start. Maybe. I don't know if that's too wide, but we can go with that. No, this was supposed to go here. And then this dot first name equals first name. This dot surname equals surname. And then we'll go up here and we'll set these to this to begin with. That way we can treat them as null. This should be a count of 0, I think. So we can just check the string for a count. Or length. I think they have length, right? Like surname.length. Yeah. So then we have stats. We just make a character window. Question is also how much of this should be apparent. I think it shouldn't be. I think for your characters, it might be more okay for this to be visible. Maybe even showing the actual number. I'm not sure. It's one of these things that can be kind of difficult. Because when I think of it, I'm like, okay, I would like it to maybe not be like apparent what their stats are. And maybe it should be like very low, low, medium, high, etc. But because that feels more like immersive, I guess. But it also is annoying when things just are like that. Because it's like, okay, what the fuck is high? You just don't have any real, like, way of gauging what that means. Whereas a number is just actually... it just is what it is. So I'm not sure. Honestly, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. We're kind of just making it up as we go along a little bit. I know what I want it to be like. I don't know how I want it to be like. Exactly. When it comes down to the details. And we might have to do some portrait generation as well. Which is... it's not necessarily great. I don't really like portrait generation because... first of all, it's really hard to do. But second of all, you like almost immediately just have characters that feel like it's the same character. Like almost every single time. Just the fact that they have, like, even if you have multiple, like, facial angles and stuff that you have that can be generated, they still feel like the same character if they have the same angle. Even if it's... if they have completely different skin color, or hairstyles, whatever, right? They still feel the same. But we'll see. I have done portrait generation before, and it is doable. Just need to make sure you have different facial structures and stuff as well. But yeah, it is one of those things that you really need to put a lot of effort into it for it to be good. It's not something you can do. You're like, oh, I just make a face and then we put some eyes on it and that'll be easy and we'll have lots of faces. It's easy, no. I want the title on him. So let's add that for now. What else do they need? Doesn't matter. Um, what else do I see need? Well, whatever. Let's not worry about it. Let's start them at like 5 years old for now. Yeah. We're gonna need to add some other things as well. such as public double. I mean, I don't know exactly how to handle that. So we need game time, right? So we should have public float day. Should it go by day? And then public int month. Public int year. Public int. There's a week as well. I'm just thinking. I'm actually thinking about like story. I don't know, spacing out. Um, yeah. But I don't know if I want day to be the smallest value or if I want hours. Because I'm not really sure what kind of time scale I want the game to really operate on. I do think it should probably be day that's the smallest. Maybe. Or if we represent the day by hours, I'm not sure. But oh, Jesus. Either way, it's kind of the same. I'll be right back. Let's make the game have time that progresses and have like a time counter in the corner. Let's not do that. Let's make a new script called Time Manager. And then we'll move this in there. Nah. Let's have a float hour. At least for now. We can just change that later. And then here we're gonna say public float time scale set time scale float time scale this dot time scale public void update. Then we'll say hour plus equals game time, fuck you, times time scale. But it's game time dot elapsed game time dot seconds total seconds. That's it, right? Or should this just be a double? I mean, why not? Not like it takes up a lot of space. And then we can say if hour is greater than or equal to 24, then day plus equals 1. And hour minus equals 24. D is double, right? Yeah. And then we'll say if day is greater than we'll say if month divided by 2 equals no, wait. Month modulo 2 so the month starts at 1, 1, 1. Hour starts at 0. Your year, we'll set that. So if month modulo 1 equals I always have to check how modulo works. Hold on. One modulo 1 is 1. 2 modulo 1 is... Yeah, okay. So if month modulo 1 equals 0, then it's an odd. An odd month. Then we'll say if day is greater than 31, then month plus equals 1, day minus 31. Else we'll say if month equals 2, if a day this isn't actually accurate. This won't actually work, but we'll see. Because the reality is that months are tailored for planets. So if we're not on Earth, then you can't really have the same calendar unless the entire goal is to just be synced up with Earth. In which case, I feel like once you start establishing an interstellar civilization, I feel like you would need to have multiple date systems. Like each planet would need to develop their own calendar, but there would also be an intergalactic calendar. Because the planet needs to have their own calendar. Otherwise, it won't make any sense for people to be like, yeah, this month, this month is the growth season, whatever. It's just gonna be fucked up. But I think it would be a lot simpler. I think it would be... They would just calculate how long does it take for the planet to rotate and how long does it take for it to go around the sun. And then you, like, instead of having like we have now, like January, February, etc., I feel like it would make more sense to create almost something more gamified. But for now, let's just set it up like it's Earth. This only needs to be checked if the hour progresses. like that. Hello, Button. How's it going? Working on a game? Yeah, I'm working on a game. Not much to it yet. It's very early. But, can click on hexagons, and that's it. Pretty much. But it's meant to be a role-playing game and grand strategy hybrid. I want to make something along the lines of like Crusader Kings meets Shadow Empire or something, but with a much larger focus on characters than both of them. Something like that. Alright, so we made a time manager. Let's go and make it then. Public time manager. Time manager equals new time manager. Okay, let's not set a new time manager there. Let's set it down here. Time manager equals new time manager. And it wants a year. I don't know what the year should be. 7, 6 something. Month 4, week 3. Day 5. Hour 8. which should be a double, actually. And then in update, we're gonna say time manager.update game time. And then in handle keyboard input, I'm gonna remove this. Actually, let's keys. What is F? What's D? Print. Is D digit? So like 1 is... I have a game object called main, and it's also used for global variables. I like to make these game objects singletons. Yeah, I have one called globals. That's how I handle access and stuff. Like, I have a static class called globals, and there you can just access the main controller, main. And then main has access to everything. Yeah, let's see. Where were we? Here. Okay, D0 to D9 is the number keys. The digits. Yeah. Okay. I realize now that it's a singleton because I also have some code in there that can act on the variables, else I could have used static. Yeah, I mean, I think it's just good practice to have like one. Like, I don't know if the singleton concept really exists outside of like Unity. Because I feel like it's just, you know, you just make a main controller and then just that main class just like handles everything. Whereas in Unity, in order to do that, you kind of have to create an object that exists in all scenes. And that's where like the singleton thing really is a thing. But I get what you mean, right? And I always try to have one class that just everything goes through, so that everything can access everything through that. So if we press 1, then we want to set time manager dot time scale equals 0D. And then we want this up to like 4. 2 is 1. 3 is 2. And 4 is 3. It's either that or space being pause, but I don't know, I kind of like 1 being pause. And then what we need to do is we need to add a draw to time manager. And this then needs to draw text. Draw string. And that string should look like date. Year. How should we format it? A dash? We'll just do something. Year, month, week. Actually, I think we should just go to straight to day. I still think week should be a thing. Actually, I'm not calculating the weeks anyway, but... And then what? Like, period? And then... time. Hour. But the hour should maybe be an integer. Okay. Sprite batch. And that's the string. And then we need a position. And I don't know what that position should be. We can just say new vector 2. This is not a very good way to do it, but I just want to get it working. And this isn't sprite batch. This is... Arial font, there. And then in draw, we just say time manager.draw sprite batch. Time just went from 0 to 10. But it does work. The time is going up. What if we press 2? What if we press 1? Time stopped. 3. Time is going faster. 4. Time's going faster. But times 2, times 3 is not enough. It needs to be much faster. I think. But again, I don't know what the time scale should be, really, so this is actually flowing quite fast. But if we're looking at the game from like a year-to-year scale, like it would be in most grand strategy games, then this is like slower than normal speed there. Is it gonna be real time, not turn-based? Yeah, real time. Or real time with pause. Just like RimWorld or something. Just like Crusader Kings. The units, or I don't know exactly how I'm gonna handle like armies and stuff. I don't really know. This isn't really like a genre I usually play that much, and it's also not really a genre that have any games like the game I'm trying to make, so I don't really have that much in terms of reference. So I'm not really sure exactly like the kind of scale I want things to be, like how big should a nation be on the map, and how should it look when you're moving units, and how much space should like an army be able to occupy or contest or whatever. Like, I'm not really sure. But that's what we have to test. Because it also depends on like what kind of map size can I support. Like writing a billion tiles is super easy, but then you have to also populate the world with things, and you also need to populate the world with AI and AI behavior. And I don't know like how many nations and shit can we keep doing things in like real time before it shits the bed. But we'll see. They do manage to have quite a lot in other games, like Terra Invicta or something. They have all those aliens and stuff out on the random. Have you considered making it multiplayer? No. It could be at some point, but that's not a focus at all. The main goal is to make it be like a story game, more than just being like a. Because I want it to be procedural, like lots of procedural generation, procedural events and stuff. But the first goal is to make an actual structured story campaign where you play as a certain character in a story that's meant to go a certain way. Kind of like if you're playing Hearts of Iron or something, there's a setting you can check or uncheck when you make a new game that makes the game follow historical events, right? And so things happen like they happen in history. Kind of like that, but for a made-up story and storyline. But I also want procedural generation, but we'll see. First of all, we need to make things capable of happening. So how do we want to add event triggering? Events need to happen for a reason. They shouldn't just be like time-based RNG. But for now, we can say like let's say every day there's a chance if globals dot random dot next ten 11 is less than 1, then public void trigger event. And for now, that's just gonna say event window toggle window event window enable, and it's also gonna say previous wait hold on float previous time scale. That's a double. I try to stick to procedural code so I have a better idea of what's happening at every take. Also easier to debug. Yeah, I don't know. I just do things as I see. It's whatever seems like it makes sense at the time, to be honest. Unity has its event, of course. Yeah. My other project is in Unity, but I don't really like using Unity's systems. I typically... I just wrote my own stuff, really. Okay, let's say previous timescale is in the time manager. So we want to say public void pulse. Previous timescale equals timescale. And then we want a public void unpulse. Timescale equals previous timescale. When I started out with Unity, I was so impressed by the animator, and I guess because of tutorials, I ended up using them as state machines. Learned from that mistake. Wait, what do you mean by the animator? You mean the mechanism system? Because that is state machines. That it is a state machine. But I just feel like doing anything the Unity way is just kind of more complicated than it needs to be for certain games, so I drive the states from code, not using the animation states to dictate code. Right. This is then pause. No, it's fine. And then here, close event window. Toggle window. And then here, time manager dot unpause. And then this should be close event window. Song is so stupid. Now we have time going there. It's because it starts open. Let's see. It's set here. Oh my god, how long is this thing? It's fucking like 5 minutes. Okay. Event window. Let's do window entity is enabled equals false. Now we have time going there. We're just playing the game, blah, 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 blah. Doing stuff. Nothing's happening. I shouldn't have set it to 10%. Let's see. Time manager. Oh, I didn't even do anything. Good thing we didn't sit there and wait. Then we'll say globals.main.event trigger event, right? And then we'll see. Does this do anything? Or didn't I just make it like 100%? There we go. It didn't pause though. Time manager.pause. Oh yeah. Time scale equals 0D. And here we have this, right? This is gonna say if this is not a good way to do this, but we'll do it for now. Window if event window dot is enabled is false, then we can do this. That should basically be like, I don't know. Something, maybe it should just be an entity list. Something, it should be like, if something is making the game pause and unable to be unpaused, then we shouldn't be able to unpause, but it needs an easy way to do that. Because I could make it like a boolean, but I think that's bad. Because if it's a boolean, then what if you have two things that have the game paused and then you close one, right? So I think just having a list of things adding themselves to that list, and if that list has any count in it at all, then the game is paused. And there, that triggered this. We cannot start the game. We can click outside though. Then we have to make a selection, and then the game progresses again. Okay. Now what? Should we make some kind of like domain? I don't know what to call it though. Maybe it should be called a domain. I'll be right back. I'm just thinking, because we need to make the tiles belong to a state, basically. But it also depends a bit, like, because you might not be a nation, you might just be a faction within a nation, and like you have control over a certain area, and then the greater nation has another control. That's why I was thinking of calling it a domain for like the immediate area that you have control over. But then there's the question of like setting the tiles to have ownership. Which I think should just be hash sets. The tiles should not contain that info. The tiles already contain too much. This should just be a byte. See, it's a matter of like how to render things. That's the issue. I almost think that each tile might as well just contain a byte that just tells us what faction it belongs to. And the reason for that is because otherwise I'm gonna have to store that anyway somewhere. Right? Because storing the timescale ints could be enums? Oh yeah. Yeah, they could. But yeah, like I could store all the tiles like within, because I was thinking like, oh, I could have a list of hash sets of integers, and each hash set would be like an indexed hash set. So the list contains like maybe say 10 hash sets, and each index would point towards a nation. In fact, it could be a dictionary instead, and then you just like check the nation through there. And then you check like which tiles belong to this nation, right? Like that would be like, yeah, sure. But then the thing is, because I want to render it, right? I want to render it using this listing somehow. Because we need to render borders, right? So we need to generate where the borders are. But that shouldn't be done like every update. That should only be generated when a border changes. That should be changed. So I don't know. Because the hexagon needs to be able to know, like, a byte would only be enough to tell us which sides are edges. Because it would need to be a bit switch, where one, like the first bit represents the top right, etc. So you can enable all of them to be edges. And then it would also need an index, so it would need to be at least 16 bits. But nation indexing is also dangerous. Because what if See, that's why I don't really want to do it through the tile, because as I'm rendering the tile, we need to check what that tile belongs to, and then write an edge based on the surrounding hexagons. But what if a nation is wiped out? Then in order to destroy that nation, we would have to like de-index it. Either we just like hide it and keep it in the system as that index, but it's just like disabled. Or we would have to like change the value of every tile. I don't know how to do this. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to assign ownership of hexagons to nations in a way that allows me to do that and use that to render the ownership too. And no, it's fine. We'll figure it out. Maybe. Maybe not today. Let's start by making a domain, maybe. And the domain then has a name. X ownership. Maybe. I'm not really sure what I need here. how I want to handle this. Because there's like a domain, right? But what is supposed to be in the domain? Should the domain just be like, yeah, this is you? And every single hexagon just like adds their value to the domain's value? I don't think it should be that simple. Because I want the locality of like supplies and stuff to matter. So it's not like, okay, there's 500 supplies over in this hexagon, that means you have 500 plus supplies. Shouldn't be that easy. But at the same time, you need to have I think you need to have like a capital. Or a seat of power. And then I don't know if everything should be stored in that hex. I don't think so. But I do think that each hexagon should contain a class. And that class should be modular, I think. It should be like... It should be like a component system for a hexagon. Kind of. How should that work? What should it be called? Hex contents. Hex content. Hex content. No. Well, sure. But let's make another one and call it Hex content container. And then the container can have a list of hex content. Maybe. And the hex content class should just have because I'm thinking like cities and stuff like that should be stored in the hex. But like, it needs to be a class so that they can just have a null. That way, it's still, like, the null reference still eats up like 32 bits, I think, or maybe it's even 64. I'm not sure. Actually, let's ask. Four bytes on 32, 8 bytes on 64-bit runtimes. Yeah. So it's actually any reference is 8 bytes. Which means by adding a class reference, that makes every single tile 64 bits heavier. Even with them being null. But it does mean that each hex won't need to contain some bullshit. I mean, it could be a dictionary too. We don't necessarily, it doesn't need to be in there. Yeah, I already solved this at some point. So what we'll do is we'll make a public dictionary int, and it contains hex content containers. Hex content dictionary. Right? And then the grid matrix is doing a draw here. So it'll simply have to calculate the one-dimensional index of the hexagon. And we'll do something like... But we should draw the background first, I think. And then draw the selection. And then after that, what we need to do is we already have it. I, X, I, Y. And then we have a matrix size dot X. Let's say int index equals, and then we'll see if globals.main dot hex content dictionary dot contains key index or should I just do try get? Try get value out hex content container hex content. Then we'll say hex content dot draw, but it doesn't have that. Also, let's call it hex content container, just so that's clear that it's not the content. Then we go to the container and we write public void draw, write batch, and then we say for hex content list dot count hex content list I dot draw write batch. Then we go to hex content and we're gonna just give it a public void draw write batch SB, and then that's that. Actually, it should be a virtual. We'll also have a public virtual update, I think. That maybe takes game time. Not sure. Like that. So now basically, every time a tile tries to render, it will render whatever content is within it. And that might be like a city or something. But I'm not sure if we render that or how we render that. But it might be doable, we'll see. I don't know how I'll represent a city if I just completely change the tile's value to be like a, or its type to be city, or if there'll be cities in like a forest tile, or I'm not sure. We'll see. But that's just a draw step, right? Now, how should a hexagon work? Should it have... No, the hexagon itself shouldn't update. It's whatever content the tile has should update. And I think if we're gonna do anything with like the tile's contents... See, that's the thing. Because as much as possible, I want to avoid doing things like in the tiles and giving the tiles logic in and of themselves. So it's like a tile that's like a field. I feel would have like a certain amount of supplies, maybe? Or maybe not. Maybe it just shouldn't have supplies, because it's like... Is foraging really something that should be much of a thing? Or should all supplies be from the tile containing something like... actual, like an actual... crop field, right? Because then that would be content. Otherwise, just being plains should maybe not have supplies, but... Yeah, I don't think... Yeah. I think it should be mainly around, like, supply sources. It shouldn't be about this kind of tile has this or that much supplies. It should be about just supply lines from supply stations. Like that, like in Shadow Empire. It's really complicated there, though. I don't know if I can make it any better. Because it does make sense there. Like, I do think it's overcomplicated and convoluted, but I also think that it kind of needs to be to some extent. Because you can be like, yeah, okay. We'll just say that this place here has like 2,000 supplies. And it has this range, and any unit that's within that range just has those supplies, right? But what happens when you have too many units? Do you just make all of them starve? Because then there's no triage. Because you would want, because that's what helps in Shadow Empire, I think, that if you don't have enough, it actually supplies, like it calculates which units are the most effective to transport supplies to, and then it goes there and like gives those units the supplies, but it makes the system really, really convoluted and hard to grasp and get into. But I really want supply lines as well, so not sure. I feel like it needs to maybe do something like that. Like roads should matter. And that's also, like, the second we start talking about roads too, that begs the question, like, okay, how big should the actual scale be for everything in the game? Because for a road to matter and, like, exist in the first place, we have to be pretty micro compared to, like, Crusader Kings or Victoria, for example. Because in Victoria, you're working at a national scale. But I also want to work at kind of a national scale. I don't know. I think it would be okay for the game to, like, take place within one nation. That's what makes the most sense. But then the question is, like, okay, but what about the rest of the world? Because, like, the nation needs to have outside influence. And how much should that be? How big should the world map be? And I also don't like not having a larger map, to some extent. But it's just unfeasible to generate, like, a world at a certain scale. And it also doesn't really matter, necessarily. Because having a ton of nations, like, over on the other side of the globe, doesn't matter. Unless you can, like, play there, and be those, which you aren't supposed to be able to do, at least initially. If ever. Because the larger the world, the more, like, making sure tiles don't really contain anything becomes important, because if the world needs to consist of a lot of tiles, then yeah, I don't know. Because I'm just thinking, right? Because I really want the game. I really want. Oh no, we have errors. I really want the game to take place in a way where you have your own area. I want things to be able to happen there, but I don't know how big is big enough. And I want the game to take place within a nation. But you're supposed to be like one area in that nation. And then if you think of it like logically compared to real life, even a fairly small nation like Sweden or something is massive. Right? So what are there, like 5 factions that are this big in one nation? Then that kind of feels like it's actually like a really small nation. But even so, 5 areas like this for one nation would make the world be absolutely humongous. If you want to have more like realistic amounts of nations. So if we try to calculate this to some extent, like let's say that this is like your play area in the beginning, maybe. How much is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let's say that this is 10 times 10. That's 100 tiles. And how many major areas would that be? Like, let's say Sweden. Sweden is 21 counties. That would mean that Sweden is 2,100 tiles. And like 21 characters. But we don't need to have nations that are as large as they are in real life. They could be smaller. But let's say you have like 100 nations the size of Sweden. That's 200,000 tiles. It's really not that bad. Miles? Maybe. Yeah, miles are stupid. Because the amount of tiles, I think, is not a big deal here. Because in our other game, I have this many tiles, potentially. This is just a lot of tiles. 100 million tiles. Like 2 times, like, let's say 200 bits. What is that? It's like 5 megabytes. That's nothing. Yeah, so it really all boils down to AI complexity and like how much the AI eats up performance, I suppose. Did you not say miles? No, I said tiles. I'm just thinking. Well, it is also. It would also boil down to like how many miles or how many kilometers does one tile span, as well. More or less. That is also a thing to think of. But then the question is like, if you end up in a small area like this, how can we make that interesting? But the idea is that we're going to figure out ways to make gameplay interesting beyond it just being like sending units out to tiles. And by gameplay, I mean waiting for time to progress so something happens that you can engage with. Kind of. Hmm. I don't know if I want a nation to be 21 of these, though, but we'll see. But I think... Hmm... Actually, it's fine. I guess. I feel like there's no really good solution here, but what if we do something like public dictionary int domain master domain dict. And then we do the same thing here, except we add a nation. And then this is a master nation dictionary. And then we say public dictionary int tile domain ownership dictionary. Maybe. And then here we point towards here. And here we could bake it in here. Let's write a little comment here. Use 16 to 24 bits for domain ref. Use 8 bits for hex hex edge assignment. Is how many? Let's say we have. The world has 195 recognized countries. And that's on Earth. And I would want to have less than that. For sure. But let's say we make 195 countries the size of Sweden. That would be 4,095 domains. That easily fits within what? That's 12. So 16 bits is giga overkill for domain indexing. That means we have another 16 bits free. And then, yeah, that could be here. Here we have 6 bits for hexagon edge assignment. I don't know what we would put here. Because, yeah, 16 bits is still too much, right? 65,000. I said 4,000. And even that's... The reality is it's doable with just, like, the base stuff, but... It's not... I don't think it's gonna be doable at all with any kind of AI involvement, really. Because that's a lot of bullshit. But I think we might stop here soon. I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I'm just kind of trying to fit some things in. This is a big step. Figure all of this shit out. But basically, we have to create domains, which is gonna be like a domain will have a leader in some fashion. The domain will need to have some kind of leadership structure. And then the domain will belong to a nation, most likely. Unless, you know, well, even if the nation is just one domain, it would belong, the domain would belong to the nation. And once we've figured that out, we can just make like a test domain, I suppose. And just try to make a window for it. Yeah. We'll stop there. Maybe do some more tomorrow. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll be back later tonight. We'll play some Space Haven. Until then, I'm gonna go and do some other work for a while. In a bit. Yeah, I think we did decent progress today. We added a bunch of stuff. Fixed the window, made the window able to pop up. We added time. Which is working to some extent. We have this event window that doesn't have a title or anything in it. No event, no buttons, nothing. How the event system is going to work exactly, I think it's going to be an iterative process. I think we just have to start somewhere and go, and then rework it a couple of times until we figure it out entirely. But because I want the base event. You want to create an event, and then the event should have like players. It should have a bunch of variables, like what is happening, it's some kind of conflict or whatever. And then that should be able to go through a branching tree of things that happen. But I don't want events to just be like they come out of nowhere. Like this is just an event that happens. I think there needs to be a little bit of a mix. There needs to be events like that. Things that just kind of happen a little bit out of the blue. But I also want things to be able to trigger events. Like the AI should be able to trigger events. Because they are like doing something with you for whatever reason. They're sending demands, they're doing this or that. They're trying to build relations. So it needs to be kind of multifaceted. I think. Well, either way, it's not going to be easy, but we'll figure something out. Until next time, thanks for hanging. Have a good day. Bye-bye.